Hi, this is Damien AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist. And I'm also an anarcho-humanist. And I'm going to do a video today on the rise of inequality. So first, I want to explain I'm an axiological atheist, which is a value theory or a value science atheist. And I also hold a rationalist persuasion, and I support anarcho-humanism. What anarcho-humanism means to me, basically, is that I am a socialist, collectivist, mutualist anarchist, as well as I'm rather liberal, progressive, and also very revolutionary. Generally understood simply, though, it's that I want all positive change that supports human well-being and human flourishing with a deep respect for human equality, as well as freedom, liberty, and human dignity. What inspires my anarcho-humanism in a general way is that we're all one connected family, which is demonstrated through the fact of our shared DNA, tracing back to the origin of Africa. I realize that in a sense, if we're honest, even though we draw lines and call them states and countries, in a sense, nobody owns the earth. So to me, the best way to handle this is that we should all try to share it, as communally as possible. And then the other understanding to me is that if you can't trust people with freedoms for their own bodies, in a sense, how do we trust people with power? And so what I'm going to address today is the rise of the unequal power. To me, patriarchy, as well as state inequality, were not a one-time, all or nothing deal. In a sense, it was a gradual path, moving away from, in a sense, more egalitarian societies and egalitarian economies, to one of more inequality, which goes from about 12,000 years ago, which is in a sense the split of women's status, and then the spread of Neolithic farming, sowed the seeds of, in a sense, modern inequality 10,000 years ago, to around 8,000 years ago, with the hoarding of many women mates, excluding other men. In fact, globally, in a general sense, it was around 17 women were, in a sense, reproductive for every one man. Then around 7,000 years ago, there's, in a sense, the emergence of, in a big way, of the male god. And this also is followed by an inequality in burials seen in the differences in how they're buried from gender of men and women, reaching a more extreme point around about 6,000 years ago with, in a sense, the proto-male kings, in which to me is also the beginning of the ideas of state and real unequal power. And this leads to these new statist ideas, the ideas of hierarchy. The ideas of statism is more largely formed about 5,500 years ago, but definitely by 5,000 years ago, it becomes even more formalized with the emergence of Egypt's male-run empire states, where you have a whole country, in a sense, unified under one type of governance. And then the formalization also of state-sanctioned patriarchy. This grows ever stronger worldwide until around 2,000 years ago, when, in a sense, it becomes pretty much the law of the land, both, in a sense, hierarchy structures and patriarchy. So if we look at more of the facts itself, the first, in a sense, major armed conflict is about 13,000 years ago. It is well known that most hunter-gatherer groups, women used, in a sense, grinding stones for processing food in places like Israel at least about 12,000 years ago. Also seen with ovens for cooking probably dough or bread. And this in a sense, is the signature so-called women's work. Shows that this bread making and baking and this eating of grains, which allows also grains different than regular food, because hunting and gathering, a lot of times the food would spoil. And so you can't really have large amounts of foodstuffs being stored until grains. Really, grains allows this unequal because it allows you to dry and store large amounts of food in a sense and thus gain wealth. About 10,000 years ago is about the first time for the first massacre. It seems like some sort of a conflict between people, men and women, not just men. So it's not just like a fighting, it's actual like a massacre, like a genocide sort of thing. And then to me, the fact that the Neolithic farming, spreads this inequality at the similar time really shows that there is a kind of a connection. So about 8,000 years ago, like I said, with the spread of farming, there's even more so. There's 17 women reproducing for every one man. So either you would say either the males are not being allowed to mate with so many females, or you're getting the fact of war or conflict causing the male population to die off. Either way, it's either showing oppression from one side or the other. And this inequality, in a sense, is nothing new. In fact, a study shows that it dates back at least 7,000 years ago, with evidence showing that farmers, in a sense, were buried with tools that had access, in a sense, to better land. So it was this another thing that hunting gathering didn't do. Hunting gathering allows you, in a sense, to have an equal distribution in a general sense of land. But when you have farming, all of a sudden you're owning a piece of land, and then you're also passing it down in a sense that I own this land, I made the area, cultivated it, and then spread it, passing it down through family in a sense. This also is seen strongly, and they've been finding stuff with early Neolithic were more likely than men to have, in a sense, originated burials outside of where their bodies were found. In other words, that they maybe have lived in one area, but they end up being buried in another area. And this also shows a strong indication of this male-centered, in a sense, kinship system, where females move to reside in location of where the males that they marry. And this is showing that, in a sense, the males are owning the land. It's not like an equal distribution of females owning land and males owning land. And then at the Varna culture with the proto king grave, to me, grave number 43, is around 6,000 years ago, 6,200 or so. And in a sense, at this grave has, in a sense, an obvious high status male, and its unfathomable riches of gold compared to the general area of any kind of burial. In fact, more gold was in this one grave of this one man than is it the whole rest of the world at this whole period of time. And so, in a sense, Varna's society shows that it's very stratified. You have extremely rich males and a middle class, possibly, but generally most people had nothing more than a sense a pot and a knife to call their own. So there's this real inequality brewing about 6,000 years ago. And then Mesopotamia's Uruk is one of the first city-states and also the main force, in a sense, what we call urbanization and state formation during what's called the Uruk period, or the Uruk expansion. That kind of roughly starts from 6,000 to about 5,200. So it's about an 800-year, in a sense, shift of this bureaucracy and military campaigns and this emerging and formalizing of stratified society. Moreover, it's around 5,600 years ago that we saw the invention of writing in the Sumerian Uruk. And then it's around 5,500 years ago when there's, in a sense, this first formalized written evidence of the religion in Sumerian cuneiform. And then about the same time, in central Syria, there appears to have been a city that had been full-blown from at least 6,500 years ago, but probably not a state, in a sense, kind of society. It could go back to 8,000 years ago. But it's at the time that, in a sense, this Yerk statism colonists arrive, or invaders, and then suddenly the entire city is wiped out about 5,500 years ago. Then it's around 5,000 years ago that, in a sense, Egypt has its first king pharaoh and begins, in a sense, the unification of the north and the south into one country empire under Namur, and founded the first dynasty. And one of the scenes for this king is a ceremonious scene in which captives and plunder are, in a sense, presented to King Namur with a recorded animal and human plunder of 400,000 cattle, 1,422,000 goats, and 120,000 human captives. And so, to me, when we think of, often we're told, these, great societies that brought everything together, there's often this forgetting of the actual inequality that they truly brought. And that it's not some great thing that society started to form and help us. It's also this, great juggernaut of inequality that helped oppress us. And that's it. So I just wanted to do a quick video on that. Thank you. And we rise by helping each other, and we will wither if we stay separate.